that has done the exact same thing, albeit with a new twist. The Central Bank of China. The Central Bank of China, the People's Bank of China, I believe it's called directly, does not borrow its money from a private central bank. It is not a private central bank loaning the state money. No, they're issuing true currency against the goods and services as a receipt against the goods and services of China. That's one of the reasons why they're debt-free. They're not in a monetized debt type of system. They are in a, they try to do exactly what the Germans have done, and they've done it very, very well. The flaw in the Chinese model is that you now have a global Federal Reserve Bank, a Federal Reserve Bank with a reserve status currency, and all the commodities are priced in dollars. So what did you do? They linked their yuan to the dollar. The dollar is, so it's kind of funny. You have the largest known modern sense outside, the only time since the Reichsbank where someone has a state has issued money directly, and this is a state issuing money directly and linked to the dream private central bank. A central bank that they don't need anything linked in gold, because to buy gold you gotta first convert your money into your Russian rubles into dollars. It's kind of a funny situation here. But it is a big argument. You hear it over and over again. I never understood what the difference was. Now, philosophically, obviously, it seems like you do very well for yourself to kick out the private bankers. Well, we're not here to be all idealistic and all that. I just want you to understand the exact approach, and I'm gonna go into some different things I would do if I were a Republican or if I were repealing to try to knock out the neocons. You see, under this private central banking scheme, under this private central banking scheme, the only flaw is, under this philosophy of money of private central bank in something like the Federal Reserve Bank, is if someone is big enough to really cause you problems, and you don't work with them, or you don't create win-win situations, because everyone in the world 10 years ago wanted to work with America. Everyone in the world, the Russians understood that the Federal Reserve Bank was a private central bank. They understood, they're very sophisticated there. But at the same time, no one's interested in necessarily knocking you out as long as you're not screwing them over, being too greedy. What these fools did, the neocons went in there and tried to take over Russia. They tried to split the place up. They tried to destroy the place, so much so that the oligarchs, which are all tied to neocons, are sitting in London, and some of them are already have sentences on their head in Russia for 13, 15 years, or they're already in jail in Russia. And you got these guys like Berezovsky. I don't know if I pronounce his name correctly. He's got to sit in London. He can't move because the Russians have him. He's been in trial in absentia and sentenced to like 15 years or something like that. There's guys like this in Tel Aviv, and they're all connected to the neocons. The neocons cannot have a relationship with Russia. They got to go to war with them. But you can't go to war with Russia. You can't. You can't. This relationship that neocons have with Russia has cost the private central bankers in Anglosphere everything. Everything. Because Russia is the only one on the planet that can actually effectively lead a coalition against them. Why? Because they're sophisticated and they understand it. Another thing they have is, guess what Russia has? Russia has the largest natural resources in the world, easily, under one roof. They have the largest natural gas reserves. They have the second largest oil reserves, and that's just what we know about. Who knows what they have? They could easily have They could easily have Saudi Arabia eclipsed by 2 and not tell you. That's Russia. I mean, if you're the largest if you have the largest oil reserves in the world, maybe it's your interest not to let other people know if they're not treating you well or whatever. Russians are sneaky like that. Who can blame them? If you're long a bunch of oil, and you're an oil trader, if you're long a bunch of oil, you might not want people to know how long you are. But this relationship, this inability to work with the Russians have cost them everything. Have cost the money people in Anglosphere everything. It put them on the ropes permanently, and may have put them under permanently. But using that and using their inability to work with the Russians I would sit and I would pound the neocons every day, because the neocons are a big problem for us. Yes, they're a big problem. We got a bird in the hand, the Republicans, and we can't use it because of the neocons and the Lone Rangers. The Lone Rangers are going to have problems, and I'm going to go into all this. We're going all into this in a few minutes here. In the next X many minutes, we're going into this. But you can use that. By understanding this, you can appeal to this relationship you could easily have with the Russians. The Russians offered to spend, I don't know, there's only a 65-mile difference between Alaska and Siberia. The Russians did all kinds of feasibility studies, and this started a long, long time ago. I mean, one of the czars talked about building a tunnel underneath Siberia to drive all the way to New York and stuff like that. Well, if you can get to Alaska, you can drive to New York, right? And it's only 65 miles or so between Alaska and Siberia. You just got to put a tunnel underneath there. Well, the Republicans, Putin himself, even as late as 2006, wanted to put a tunnel underneath there, or do a couple tunnels. Yeah, you could put a pipeline underneath one into Alaska, and let's face it, there's still all kinds of pipelines coming out of Alaska. You could do all kinds of interesting things with the Russians in regard to natural resources. If that relationship with Russia was not damaged, you wouldn't have near as many global problems with the dollar, because no one could rally against you. Russia has led everyone against us and the dollar. In relation to this private central bank and the way the neocons have used it to screw over a lot of people. Now, how do the neocons get away with this? Well, I'll tell you what the neocons do. The neocons says, well, the Federal Reserve Bank, we got everything on the planet priced in dollars, but the big key relationship is oil. So we got to be in that Middle East. We got to support that Israel, because if we don't support Israel, we don't have a partner in the Middle East. Well, we're not going to be able to control anything and get that Saudi Arabia oil and so on and so forth, etc. So we got to have our nose in the Middle East. Well, what you would say is the direct opposite. Well, you've already screwed up our relationship with Russia. We could have already been diversified out of the Middle East. We could have been diversified out of the Middle East. They could have had a pipeline by 2000. They could have had a pipeline underneath Alaska, and we could be diversifying our energy resources night and day out of the Middle East. We're always going to have Saudi Arabia. Who else are they going to sell all that oil to? Everyone wants to sell us oil, but we want to diversify away from Arabs and Muslims and into European Christians. It's just common sense. By the way, you can divide and rule the Jews over too. Some of the Jews are smart. They even want to do that. Why are we listening to these neocons? It's much easier to work with Russians than it is Muslims. Pooty-poot might be a lot of things, but he's not interested in taking over. I mean, he could care less if Israel exists or not. That's your problem. He could care less if it's there, fine. If it's not, fine. But having all these relationships, these tenuous relationships in the Middle East regarding natural resources is too dangerous long term. You want to diversify out of that. Russia was a golden opportunity. They dropped the ball on it. They dropped the ball because their ethnic interests won't allow them. Not just, by the way, even in regards to Israel, it's smart to diversify but they can't have a relationship with Russia. They got to go to war with Russia. Why? Because they've already started a war with Russia a long, long time ago. When you have all the people attached to the neocons, they're not necessarily attached to Hebrews per se, but a lot of them are. All these neocon oligarchs, which happen to be Hebrew, running around Russia, who get busted, thrown in jail, or wanted dead or alive. Well, you can't really have a relationship with them, and it's caused a lot of international problems, in my opinion. It's caused a huge problem for Anglo banking for the reasons I just laid out. If you have a dollar, and your dollar's reserve status, and the Bank of England and everything's tied to this, you have every commodity in the world priced with dollars. You want to keep that advantage. You want, I'm not being idealistic. I'm just giving you a way to appeal to people. But you want to keep that, and one way to keep that is not screw over people or to pick your enemies. Making Russia an enemy was very stupid, very, very stupid. Barack Obama has went to Russia, and from what I've heard, he was very, very respectful. Probably because the Russians know more about him than we could ever hope to. Yeah, anyone raised a communist or around communists, it wouldn't matter whether it's McCain in a communist camp or Obama, who was raised around famous communists. The Russians are going to know more about him than we could hope to. That's good for our race. That's very good. Who knows? He probably couldn't get away with doing anything to Russia. But he was very respectful. That's intelligent. The neocons can't do that. They got to be belligerent. They got to go to war. They got, but you can appeal to certain elite parties who are sick of the neocons, and definitely make a case for yourself. especially in regard to the Republicans. You can kill the neocons. Big forte is this Middle East, and we got to have all these relationships in the Middle East because Israel's there, and we got to have oil, and oil's there, and the dollar's priced in oil, or oil's priced in dollars because natural resources are priced in dollars, and we have this private central bank, and we got to keep this relationship. Well, you can go the other direction. We need to start dealing with the Russians better.